Hello and welcome to the BNB Show. My name, of course, is Brandon Kane. And then this guy right here to my left is going to be Seahawks. Brendan Nelson in the house, helping me chop it up, turn it over, break it down, this upcoming matchup with the Tennessee Titans. How are we feeling here, Brendan, as we march down through the end of the season, as we reach
I'd
this
say
game?
I'm feeling good. I say I'm in a pretty good place right now mentally, better than we've been for a while now. So I'm ready to see what comes next.
Yeah. See if we can kind of build off what we had last week. It was a rough 4-go, but I think you and I both agree that I know we need some help some way or another. But we do feel like if we win the next 3 games, we will get in. You have an order of business ahead of you now, Brennan, with 3 opponents of winnable games. We were through the treacherous murderer's row. We are now to the spot in the schedule here where we can actually get back to maybe making some hay as the team tries to find itself. And so we're going to take a look at this Titans matchup, but I think the most important part when you get to this time of year, of course, Brennan, is we like to get into and is obviously a very important part coming into this game with this Titans team, and especially the Seahawks team in general, is where is the health at? Give the folks, if you could, a little bit of an update on our current standing in that respect.
Well, we're better off than the Titans are right now. They could almost make a whole team out of their injury report right now.
Yeah, it's looking rough for them, isn't it? What do we
Yeah, it
have on
is.
them? They've
Let's see. Aaron Brewer, Traylon Burks, Jack Gibbons, Luke Gifford, Amani Hooker, Will Levis, TK McClendon, Sean Murphy Bunting, Jeffrey Simmons, Kevon Wallace, and Trevon Wesco all did not practice today. Now, some of those guys are just depth guys, but a lot of those guys play. A lot of those guys play a lot. So that could be a very significant deal. Like they might be missing both their starting safeties in this game.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken as well, that's with already having a guy that they traded. Would they pick him? We looked at him a lot. He was the kid with the back injury out of Virginia Tech, Caleb Farley,
Yeah.
who he's been out the whole season for them. A guy had a tragic situation go on, but he's also still got, sounds like the back injury is still bothering him. Christian Fulton, another guy they drafted for that secondary, has been really beat up this year and hasn't necessarily played particularly well when he's been out there. You mentioned off the top about maybe, some quick early places we're going to get in the matchups on both sides of the ball. But from an injury standpoint, just on the head of it, on top of the performance from where they've been this year, that secondary is a place where there's definitely going to be some room for our Seahawks receivers to feast this week, isn't there?
Oh yeah, and by the way, Nick Westbrook, Akeen, I don't know what the hyphen is, but Nick Westbrook on IR now, probably going to miss the rest of the season, I guess. So that's I think their second leading receiver after Hopkins. So this is a team that is working with very little right now, and it kind of makes sense. They just got eliminated from the playoffs. They're probably very deflated right now, and I'm sure some of it is just preservation. Like we don't need to be risking these guys right now when we've got 3 games left that don't really mean much, and we're thinking about 2024.
It makes sense from their standpoint to be looking at it from their perspective of things, because they do look like they've got a lot that they need to get done. You mentioned, I think, Levis. I think that's maybe as much as anyone the important injury at play here from their side of it. It looks like he, to me, got the high ankle sprain thing. They always play this a little bit weird in their wording, but if you kind of read between the lines, it's sort of that high ankle sprain Russell got back in like 17 or something, right? Where you can technically walk on it, but you got the heavy limp and it's going to reduce down your mobility. It seems like, from what I'm hearing, and I tried to read into this and look into it, but of course, Vrabel's taking the Bill Belichick approach, we'll start, we're going to start, you'll find out on Sunday. It sounds like, though, we're going to maybe get Malik Willis.
They're saying it's going to be Tannehill.
Oh, it is going
That's
to be
my
Cannon.
yeah. I have a little bit of a theory that Vrabel really does not like Willis, and I don't blame him. Willis, when he has played so far, has looked completely unplayable. He looks like a guy playing. He looks like a guy playing Madden, and all the buttons are broken. So all he can do is run around with a joystick. Like all his throw buttons are broken, so he just runs around. That's what Malik Willis looks like. So
And
I
not
do think we're going to get
decisively.
Tannehill.
Not
Mhm.
like Lamar Jackson type where he's getting up the
Right,
field and that, like, he's just sort of doing the weave move, right?
right.
It's a lot of this when he starts to get to scrambling. It's not he
Mhm,
should get at some point get the field kid.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
Um That's interesting though, because somebody was talking when I was listening earlier this week on some podcast or other about maybe the fact that the Titans be hesitant to do that because you risk then having Tannehill go down to an injury, a guy that's been injured quite a lot, and they may want to get out from under that contract this offseason. And if he doesn't pass the physical,
I think his contract expires at the end of this season. I think
does it?
they're free and clear regardless. Him and Henry both came clear at the same time, I think.
Okay. Well,
So they're
that would
both
make
probably
sense
gone this
then.
offseason.
There you go. Okay. Well, they were wrong on that thing I was listening to then. So we get Tannehill, who has then, that's not necessarily great for Seattle to going from rookie to Tannehill because Tannehill is a guy who is, what is he, 2-0 against the Hawks in his career, I believe?
I think we beat him in 2016 when he was still with the Dolphins. Was that Tannehill? The week 1, remember, it was the Doug Baldwin
Yes.
game-winning touchdown
No,
with a
you're
minute
right.
left.
That was Adam Gase, and that was Tannehill. So
Okay.
So he is technically, I guess we got him at 2-1. 2-1 or 3-1. He might have got another one against us too when we played the Titans with the. No, that was Mariota. Okay, so he's 2-1.
Mm-hmm.
The last time he came in here, and I think that this is actually going to be an interesting thing about this game, Brendan, because you got to figure that this. I know that you don't often go back 2 years in the games to see how you played an opponent. And I know we technically do this typically offensively, defensively, but these are some random things that are just kind of coming to me. I'd be interested to kind of see where you're at with them, which is that game was pretty tough. It was a tough watch at home. You remember that one with, that was the one where they're just letting Tannehill hit the running backs underneath all day long, and he's just taking the check down the middle. And then Henry goes off at the end when your defense was wore out. You got to figure that they're going to just try to, as much as this sounds weird to just say 2 years later, different personnel, different team, you probably try to just tear out that same page if you're going up against this Carroll defense, wouldn't you? If you're Vrabel and company?
Yeah, I think you would at least try. That's clearly the formula by which this team can win games. I would say that Derrick Henry's very different from 2 years ago compared to now. 2 years ago, he was maybe the best running back in the league. Now I don't know about washed up, but I think it's like 3.7 yards per carry or something like that. It's not very good. So
can I ask you that real quick on that? Not to stop your flow on that, but can I ask you about that? Because another question I had for you on this, but because you're bringing up Henry, they also have him by PFF standards at still like a 90 grade.
I did notice that, yeah.
And you look at what he is getting from a blocking standpoint. And I only raise this question, Brendan, understanding our running backs are being similarly, held back in this way. And I'd always thought that Henry was the type of guy, this from our discussions on in the past, of a build-up speed guy, that if you can get him stopped before he gets up to that third, fourth step, you're good. But if you let him get to the fourth or fifth step, now you're in trouble. And if he doesn't have the blocking, letting him get up to that speed, he becomes a whole lot less effective as a running back. Am I off on this one maybe? Or do you think it's more that he's lost that?
Yeah, I'm sure there's some circumstance going on here. This Titans team might have, when did they get Hopkins? At what point in the season did they get Hopkins?
Off-season.
Okay, so he's been there the whole year, but even with him, they really haven't had a lot going on at receiver. Their receivers have not been good. Their quarterback play, Levis was okay, right? Like he was okay. He's showing potential, but I wouldn't call him good yet. Like these are all things that affect him, of course. I'm sure he's facing stacked boxes. Although I would say I don't mind most of his offensive line. They've got a Skoronski, who we both loved last year. They've got Dylan Radduns, I believe is how you pronounce it, at right tackle, who I remember really liking that guy in the draft. They're getting pretty good play out of their interior. Their main issue is they lost. Who was their left tackle who got injured for this year?
They let him go, actually. I think it was Luan. Yeah, they let him.
And they haven't been able to replace him. I don't think it's a terrible Titans offensive line in terms of run blocking. I think their big problem is pass protection. But if I had to guess, without having watched every single Titans game, I would say that their issue is they don't have anything to threaten these defenses the way they need to be threatened in order to back off of defending Derrick Henry. So I'm not saying he's washed up. That's kind of why I avoided that term. But he's not, I don't think he's what he was 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. And boy, he's had so many carries on that on those legs that it would be quite understandable if he is hitting that proverbial running back cliff to at least even a small degree. They also got the Nicholas Petit Frere kid that they drafted a couple years ago. He's been injured a lot of the year. I think that's the guy they were looking to maybe get into that left tackle spot and take over there for Taylor. So it's part of why that's maybe been a bit of an issue there. But as well, like you say about the receiving core, Treylon Burks, former first round pick from 2 years ago, he's had some moments, but he's not been able to quite put it together. He's got an illness right now. He had an injury early on this year. He was a guy that you kind of knew if you were going to take him that he was a highly talented guy that had a lot of work to do to refine down to becoming a really consistent player. So probably not surprising that he's taking that time yet still giving you the occasional splash play with it. Does it become then from as we I guess would lean into this defensive perspective on this, does it become then that the number one thing you start out with defensively in this game is you go, okay, they don't have the burner on the outside, but we got Derrick Henry. He got us pretty good in that game last time. We put and maybe devote some more resources into trying to stop Henry and try to trust as we can the guys on the outside, understanding that they've got a Tannehill at quarterback, a receiving core that doesn't have, like last time they had AJ Brown. They don't have that anymore. So maybe a little more easier to make some hay there.
And they had Julio Jones having his the last good game of his career, basically.
That's true. Yeah, he the two of them were tough in that game on us. Like they both gave it to us in that game.
Yeah. So I would assume so. And also in that game, your cornerbacks were Trey Flowers and who was the other guy? It wasn't
Reed?
Shaq Griffin. Yeah, it might have been DJ Reed. And now, I mean, I don't know who you're going to have, admittedly, but you're probably a little better off. It's because those were like the final days of the Trey Flowers experience when things really deteriorated to the point where, every other comment I got on my videos back then was about Trey Flowers because it was, such a demonstratively bad thing that was going on with him. So, yeah, you put it all together and you would think you would throw more assets at stopping Derrick Henry, if anything. And also, Tannehill was a different quarterback 2 years ago. 2 years ago, he was really good.
Boy, he played a great game.
Yeah, he got the Titans to the 1 seed that year, even though Julio Jones basically checked out after week 3, and Derrick Henry missed 8 games that year. Like, he was really impressive that year. I was very impressed with him. And when he was playing earlier this year, Tannehill, he was bad. It's like 2 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, inefficient offense. Like, he's definitely a different guy now. So I don't think he's going to be the guy that beats you. I don't think if you make life hard for him, I don't think he's just going to be able to beat you over the top. I don't think he's going to be able to fit the ball into these super tight windows. So, yeah, I don't know how else you would play them.
I certainly would love to see them try to force him to do so. And it's much more a scary proposition. Us came in that game going, oh, Julio, maybe he still got something there. Brown was rising and showing he was going to become one of the better receivers in this league. And you go, oh, we're going to be kind of hold on for dear life out there versus this week. I think you can afford to trust it a little bit. DeAndre's going to get his catches, but he's an intermediate guy. He's going to, be short catches here, short catches there. He'll get 7 catches for 57 yards in the game, and he'll get that. But I think you feel pretty good about trusting what you can on the outside to make that happen. Because Henry, if you can keep him from getting up to speed, like I talked about, I think that still remains the case. Let him get into that hole at full speed, and he's nobody wants to get in front of that freight train. But if you can get to the backfield, it's sort of that dun 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 dun, and if you get him right before that, he can actually be, for a big guy, relatively easy to bring to the ground. He's not like a Marshawn Lynch you hit in the backfield who can just rigid down, get that strong center base of gravity and kind of throw you off. He's going to kind of go down easy at that point. It's all really reliant on getting that engine up to the full go. And we saw that in a couple of runs the last time when he would get up the football field and you'd have defenders trying to close down. And, Quandre Diggs on one had a horrible play where he had no chance. It wasn't his fault. There's just nothing he can do. The size dimensions, the geometry, it wasn't going to happen anybody in that situation.
Yeah. And also, I feel like, Hopkins had a little bit of a report going with Levis. Like when Levis took over as the starter, that's when Hopkins really took off. this year. Like I think the first game Levis started, Hopkins had 4 touchdowns or something. So now you're putting in Tannehill, who Hopkins really wasn't doing anything with. Like maybe that report's not there anymore. So yeah, there isn't a lot on this offense that should intimidate you other than potentially Derrick Henry.
Question. If you were a defensive back coming up, Henry clears out on an outside run, and you feel he's got your hand in your face. You're about to get, that trademark move where he takes a guy and sends him like Marshawn did with the Saints back on Beastquake. Like you're going flying, Trey Porter. Do you just take the penalty and hit him in the nuts to prevent getting thrown to the sideline? Or do you have to just take your medicine at that point and let him just ragdoll you?
Is hitting him in the nuts a penalty? I have not seen that flag yet.
Well, but at least you try to do the flail as he does it, right? As he gets you right here, you go, like, and then you just do this move, like. But I would, if I was a defender coming up, I'd be like, I'm not going on that poster. You know what I mean? I'm not going on that poster.
I mean, well, what would the referee signal be for a penalty of hitting somebody in the nuts? Like,
it's got to be a nut thing, right?
Yeah, and I've never seen that. So I don't. Maybe it's not a flag. Maybe this is like some kind of market inefficiency that the NFL hasn't really caught on to yet. Like you can hit people in the nuts for like 1 week before they make it illegal. Like
I'm telling you, this is an advantage no one's taken advantage of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. It's like I think back in the 50s, the Cardinals had a little person play baseball for them. Have you ever heard about this story before?
I do. Then he went into the Ricky Henderson stands.
Yeah. And the day after they allowed this little person, literally he was like, I think 3'6" or something, to play baseball for 1 game, the league banned it because it was clearly unfair because it was impossible to throw strikes. But for that 1 game, they got the advantage of having a little person on their team. So maybe this is the next advantage, like just hit him in the nuts. And the next day they'll make it illegal. But for that 1 day, you're good.
That's right. And you don't go on the poster. That's all I'm saying. Because a couple of those guys have gotten thrown in a way where it's like for the rest of their life, they're going to go to every party and like, remember that time Derrick Henry threw you across the field? Yeah. Yeah. I remember. Thank you. So we've got a little bit of, I think the key within that. We have an offensive line, like you say, they're not putrid. They can hold up relatively well. Maybe you can get a little bit after them in the pass rush, which of course has been a part, even as we saw last week for our Hawks team, Brennan. That's been a hard for us to kind of get fully mustered up at all times, but maybe a little bit more of an opening this week than like last week when you had multiple Pro Bowlers. You were going up across the board on that Eagles offensive line. When it comes to playing Tannehill, do you try to lean into taking away his legs, or do you play like he's but that he's just going to stay in the pocket and that you can afford to kind of drop away from that? Because of course, last time it wasn't much his legs, but just that we really did try to drop at times a lot to depth in the prior matchup. Heavy depth. I know that's kind of norm for us anyway, that we see from our zone defense, but in that game especially, that's part of why he was able to get, I think, what do you have, 7-8 catches or something like that in there to his running backs throughout the course of the game. And it was because you were kind of leaving everything out of the middle of the field and everything opened up. You weren't blitzing a high amount. Do you worry about the legs with him, or do you just go, no, he's going to try and make it happen throwing. I don't trust he can make it happen throwing. We should be just kind of good staying in the pocket of what we do.
Yeah, I would expect Tannehill to not use his legs that much. He's getting to that age where, he was in the same draft class as Wilson. And unlike Wilson, Tannehill's had some crippling injuries in his career. So I don't think he's got a heck of a lot of that left in the arsenal to whip out. So I would say I would definitely go with just play it straight up. And if he does kind of what Andy Dalton did and takes off for 1 or 2 first downs over the course of a game, I'm willing to live with that as the cost of doing business. That's not really something I'm thinking of too hard.
Yeah, nor I. I would also like to, if we could, force him a little bit, like the scene we did to Jalen Hurts and deep into that second half. Maybe you can't do it for a whole game, but at least in parts of this game, try to find times where you can press some things down to force Tannehill to try to push the ball up the field and show that he can be accurate with that. He played a hell of a game that prior time. I mean, he had some really grade A throws in that game, throws with anticipation, processing. It was Trey Flowers struggling out there in coverage in that game, and yes, it was Derrick Henry going to town, but I think it was also a game where he threw for well over 350 yards. So, and then he had a couple of big drops, which I think could have put it well over 400 yards, if I'm not mistaken. There was a couple drops where he put it right on the button, and it was 30 yards down the field, and AJ Brown just dropped it. So even though he's had a tough year, even though this is coming to this being a matchup where it is Tannehill seemingly, like you say, maybe coming to a bit of the end of the line, or to the I'm going to be a backup for 4 or 5 years until I'm to the end of the line. Nonetheless, he is a guy that will understand how to go at this defense and can still be dangerous if he's on point with it. So all the much more reason this week, Brendan, to try to bring in some disguising possibilities in what you do on the defensive side of the ball to try to just change that up a bit so he doesn't feel like he knows what he's seeing clearly and cleanly, because I think that that's where he was able to execute so well against us before.
Yeah, admittedly, I'm still mentally in the place where I don't think this defense can stop much of anything. I'm still kind of mentally there. But as far as offenses go, this one's pretty uninspiring. And with all the injuries they have, like I said earlier, their interior offensive line is pretty good, but their interior offensive line is also extremely injured. Like Brewer missed practice 2 days in a row. That's their starting center. Brunskill, I think he finally practiced today, but I know he didn't practice the previous day, so we still don't know there. He was limited today. So yeah, I'm definitely, I don't have my guard down with this defense yet, just because they played well on Monday night. And I don't even know how well they played Monday night. That was a very weird game to me. And I'm still kind of confused as to how we held the Eagles to 17 points. So that being said, I think the 10 a.m. start could be more of a problem than anything going on with that actual roster.
Can Carroll get back to that place he's been at for a couple of years now here, to where he gets the team playing at a real phenomenal level at 10 a.m. games? It's been a mastery of Carroll's that I've been told that they fly him in a day earlier, and that's how he figured it out. I think he's doing a lot of little things in there to make them to a spot where they usually do play really well. We did see the last, I think, 10 a.m. game against the Ravens, where it was a little bit more closer to what you would have seen if it was the 30 years ago, to the 10 a.m. games, where these guys just sometimes it's very early in the morning. They're not all the way awoken. Their body clock's not all the way ready to go. And hopefully they can overcome that again this week. Is with the Mike Vrabel team, you may not always get the most talented team out on the other side of the football for you. You may not get the most exotic team in what they're going to do, but they're going to play every bit as tough as nails as he was as a football player. And you're going to feel a bought-in spirit on this team, whether they're winning or losing a bit. And so that you can't just afford, to me, with this team, to think you're not going to get them even at the end of the year here, a team trying to step up to the plate and give you still their best slug. I know, like you said, maybe a bit of far ranging in how they sit or start somebody is going to be a bit of like, let's just put this in the can a bit this year. But the players who do go out on the football field tend to play really hard for Vrabel. He's a very good coach at getting these guys, on tap on Sundays.
I do feel like if you hit them hard a couple times, they'll kind of not really want to get up. I do think this is the time of year where you find these teams who are out of the playoff picture, who they'll show up, but as soon as they realize this is going to be really hard to overcome, they kind of just roll over. So if we can come out and land a couple haymakers, I think we'll be all right. So that's what I'm looking for in this game.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's kind of a human nature sort of thing as far as that goes, where it's just you get that time of year, your body's tired, you're not going anywhere. It starts to sink in. I was talking with somebody here earlier today about that in regards to like the Steelers team and whether they're bought in with Tomlin anymore or not. Something we'll talk about a little bit next week. But is it that, or is it just, okay, we know we have a crap quarterback, we have a crap backup quarterback, and this team ain't going anywhere with these quarterbacks rolling like they are? Is that really maybe more of it? Who knows? But there's only one other player here really worth talking about, I think, on this Titans offense going up against our defense to pay attention to. And again, specifically for the reasons I just mentioned about the fact the last time you played the Titans, they attacked you right underneath with the running back. So the running back wasn't leaking out to the flat. They had a couple of those throws in there, but what they were going to do was they would sink the running back through the middle of the offensive formation like he was coming up to help, right? Like you're blitzing or whatever. And then he just goes right 3 or 4 or 5 yards past the line of scrimmage and sets down. All of your linebackers have sunk to zone. and then Tannehill would just dip down to that, and
Yeah.
he just
Over
leaned
and
on
over
that
and
throughout
over
the day.
again.
So we'll see if Seattle makes an adjustment to that, Brendan. On, do you just let the running back slide through there and have nobody pick him up short if he's going to do that, because you've determined that he's in there trying to block, so your backers drop because they think he's blocking and helping out? It'll be something that I do watch for in this game. And Tajay Spears is the type of back who is so really good. He had some echoes of Kamara to his game coming out. I think he's had a pretty solid year. They've still leaned heavily on Henry, but he's done well in the moments he's out there. You mentioned him, Henry averaging 3.8 yards per carry, if I'm not mistaken. He's at 4.7 yards per carry right now as Tajay Spears. And he's a true, I can do it as a runner. I can do it as a pass catcher. Very fluid, very good about, as soon as he catches the ball, turning into a runner and then being very hard to get to the ground after that.
And something like that, the fact that Spears is playing so well is part of the reason why I'm not super interested in excusing Henry this year as, it's just his offensive line. Because Spears is running behind the same offensive line. And also, I saw a thing last week that I guess Henry and Spears have played almost identical, the exact number of snaps. It's been an even split between those two guys.
Well, here's what I would just say to that. When it comes to, like, with Henry, and I only view him this way, Brendan, so you won't hear me talk about a lot of other backs in this way, but he's that one I view in this specific way. When it comes to him, he can be one of the best backs, if not the best back in the league, if you can let him get up to his build-up speed. But if he's getting penetration and if he's getting guys in the backfield, it reduces down his effectiveness considerably. Tajay Spears is a sudden stop and start, break tackles every which way but loose kind of back. So an early penetration on a play from a single guy isn't going to throw him off as much as it's going to throw a Henry off. Now, that's just my outlook on it. And does that reduce down Henry? Well, or maybe, but also if Henry gets the blocking where there are those holes getting him up to speed, he's a guy that can go crank it for 70 yards, where Spears probably is only going to get you that 35, 40-yard run there. So it's like there's a flip side to that coin on the other side of it too, as far as, from my perspective, the plus you get on it. But I've long said this isn't just a this year thing with Henry. I've long said the key with him is you've got to get him stopped before he gets going. He's one of the best backs in the league that once he's going, it's gone. You're not getting your hand on him. So, and Spears is just a completely different type of player to me in his suddenness and his shiftiness.
Right, I can see that. There's definitely some of that going on here. But Henry's at the age and at the odometer, I guess I'll call it odometer, where running backs usually kind of tail off anyway. He's actually gone a little past it, I think. So he's already gone a little bit beyond what you would expect in the modern NFL. So I don't know. I definitely don't view him the same way I did 2 years ago.
To your point on this is one of those things where you try to make a decision on a player, figure out where he is, and it gets a lot harder to do so when you don't take care of the stuff up in front of him, because it becomes kind of a debate. I'm sure it's a debatable point between you and me, and probably even in the Titans front office. That being that, hey, what if we just kept the offensive line up to snuff where it had been when he was rolling, when he was putting up only almost 2,000-yard seasons? Is he still close to that level, or is he dipped down to a 1,200-yard back behind that same line? But they can't say that because they've kind of done the patchwork thing as they've gone along. They chose to pay Tannehill, who was really not the driver of that offense, right? And that would be my one thing with it. But that's that whole thing we get back to on the sometimes tough points of making assessments when you don't make the right decisions kind of at the front of it, like teams will do in drafting a quarterback before they actually put a good offensive line together. And then they don't know what they really have in the quarterback 3 years later by the time they actually get the line put together.
All that stuff you said basically leading to Tajay Spears being one of the guys you have to be concerned about.
Yes,
on this.
That's the bottom line. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And in all ways.
Right. And I do think that in recent weeks, we are seeing that these teams that we play are picking up on the fact that Wagner can't cover. And if you attack him in coverage, good things are going to happen for you. It's I track the stats pretty much every week. It's getting worse and worse. And Seahawks Twitter goes after Bobby relentlessly every single week about how he's just not holding his own in coverage anymore. So I do imagine that is something that the Titans are going to go after with a guy like Spears. And I imagine that's something they're going to have success in because he's just, he's out of gas. Like I said last week or earlier this week, he's out of gas. It's Not really his fault. We played him too much. We asked too much of him. But it is definitely something these teams are really starting to take advantage of.
Yeah, agreed. I think it also gets compounded by, of course, the fact that we're using him in a different role from the one that he was used with the Rams last year in the season that he had last season. I mean, that's where it also is an issue. And I mean, I know, for instance, two of the glaring moments that would get the Seahawks Twitter absolutely alit, last week being in those two early drives by the Eagles where they showed clear shots from the background, Brendan, of the completions happening in front of our linebackers. And it does look like with it, Bobby's not getting up on the play. But then it's also, Bobby's dropping back 12 yards on the coverage. So is it Bobby isn't reacting quick enough to get on top of the route close? Or is it the coaches saying, no, it's third and 9. They're going to try to hit you at 12 yards. So get to 12 yards of depth. That's the part none of us can know. And I do see a lot of those snaps in there with Bobby where I'm not saying he isn't definitely at where everything you said is accurate. But just that in addition to that the use and the putting him in these positions at times is very strange sometimes in their approach for him because you're not always putting him in that position for success.
Right. And also worth noting, Weatherspoon still not practicing, might not have him this week. It's at least possible. Apparently he's doing better, but I don't think not having Witherspoon this week would be the end of the world because the Titans don't have great receivers. And some of the receivers they have, they're going to be missing. Burks and Westbrook both look like they might miss this game. In fact, Westbrook will miss this game. And also Adams still not practicing, and Pete kind of sounded like we might just shut him down, which I don't think anybody's really going to be all that sad about that if that does happen. But I am very aware of the fact that Adams, as much as he's had issues this year tackling and he's not making an impact rushing the passer, he has been doing his thing in coverage until the last 2 games he played. Like he was getting targeted at a very low rate. He was doing a very good job of not getting targeted. And while Julian Love played that amazing game on Monday night, and we're all really excited about it, his coverage metrics as a safety were atrocious before that Eagles game. He was getting targeted more than any safety in the league. So I don't want to eat the rotten cheese totally yet. And I am aware that it's at least possible that Adams might still be part of the best 11 players on this defense, as much as things went badly the last 2 games.
I've said that I hope that they don't shut him down. I think that it's in the best interest to just have him at least here if we go in the playoffs. And what if Julian Love gets an injury? What if Quandre Diggs gets an injury? You could put Julian Love to free safety and you could then have Jamal there as your backup option. There's one negative downside to doing it, which is that if you intend to cut him, you have to get to that medical release situation of a clear physical in the offseason if that's what the Hawks are intending to do. And if they were to shut him down right now, Brendan, I think it would be indicative of 2 different things. Number one, that is their intention. Number 2, that Carroll in his talks this past week on Monday or Tuesday, talking about Jamal not being in the building. And I'm not, we're not big on the soap opera stuff, and I'm not going to go too far into this, and I don't really want to go too far into this. But look, he didn't show up. And the problem with Jamal is he's breaking team rule number 1, which is protect the team. And when you don't show up at the game, is it because it's so awful that he doesn't show up to the game? No, that's not the bad part. The bad part is that in not showing up into the game, it becomes a story for people to talk about. And now you have other players on the team being asked and talked about it. And now it becomes an issue for other players on the team that they have to talk about you, making it about you, not about the team, and you're not protecting the team. That also, I believe, could be sitting really strongly at this one. And I know Carroll is, because what Carroll's doing is the opposite of what Jamal's doing. I got to give Carroll credit on that one. He could have thrown Jamal under the bus and would have been right to do so, because it's a bad look by Jamal in a season of a lot of bad off the field looks in spots. But Carroll is doing what he ascribes to, which is protect the team. That's why he's not airing Jamal out on this situation, like you had kind of at first being announced and reported. So I'm not here trying to throw more shade at Jamal or anything else with it, but that could be a bit of what goes into this decision and how they kind of hash it out when it's all said and done.
Right. Yeah. To be clear, I do think Julian Love should be the starter right now. I do think that you should go forward with Diggs and Love as your 2 starting safeties. But I just want to be clear here that I am very much aware that Love has had real problems throughout this season, and one good game against the Eagles shouldn't completely erase that. Body of work matters. and that for all I know, Adams could still be part of the best possible Seahawks defense this year.
He could. I mean, you mentioned the coverage stuff, which I'd like to dig into and look at as well, because Adams has had some moments in coverage been all right, other moments where it's, it's not always clear who's to blame. Jamal's in the mix where who's giving PFF the score to or the blame to on this particular play, where there's one play where it's like against the Cowboys where it's, well, you could technically put that on Bobby on this long crosser across the field. I don't know if you remember the play, but you also have Jamal over the top who's doing nothing to close down on the crosser over the top. He's sunk to depth. That's where it gets a little bit, to me, dicier. When I watch the two of them play, to me, I don't look at the two and say Jamal plays better in coverage than Julian this year. I've seen Julian at times making much better plays in coverage. I've seen him make bad plays, to your point too. He's had his moments where, the Lions game, I think in the Carolina game, there's been some moments that haven't been the best with him, but he also is a willing tackler and he'll get up there. And that's something with Jamal that is absolutely right now the big issue at play here is the willingness to get in there and tackle, tenacity, wanting to be, making business decisions. I think that there's a difference between the two. And the thing with Jamal now is I'm working on a video that I'm going to get on the next couple of days on my channel, Brendan. Jamal's got 30 pass rush snaps this year. That's 30.
Yeah.
And he's got no sacks. He's got 2 quarterback hits and 5 pressures. Julian Love's got 4 pass rush snaps. He's got 1 quarterback hit and 1 pressure. So Jamal doesn't even provide a better pass rushing element than Julian Love at this point. At least I know that's a sample size metric, but nonetheless, I've watched Julian Love on the blitz a couple times this year and he's looked good. He's looked like he can get there. I watched Jamal on the blitz at times and I don't know if he can even bring a quarterback down the backfield anymore. I don't want to shade Jamal too much on this, but it's an interesting decision the team's got faced in front of them, Brendan. And if they make that choice to shut him down, it tells us something.
Yeah. The thing about coverage is when I talk about Jamal being good in coverage this year, I mean in the sense that he's not getting targeted very much.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not allowed that much. As of right now, I believe Jamal Adams has allowed 175 coverage yards on the season. Julian Love has like 560 or something. Julian Love, I think, leads the entire NFL in safety yards allowed in coverage, according to PFR. PFF might have a little bit different, possibly, but I use PFR. PFR thinks that Julian Love is I think they think he's the worst coverage safety in the entire NFL.
Yeah, see, there's a wide difference right now between the PFR and what PFF's giving him as far as coverage grade goes. So this is one we're going to have to figure out maybe a little bit of a final ground because PFF has him at an 80 coverage grade, and they're talking about him. Your stat is he's the worst in the league. That's not a close gulf there. That's a huge gulf of difference between what these two analytical outlets are looking at and seeing on the football field at that point.
Right. And this happens sometimes. PFF and PFR really disagree with each other. But what I'm saying, I just looked it up. Love has allowed 552 yards in coverage this year on PFR, which I do believe leads the whole league among safeties. By the way, he doesn't even play every single snap like Jamal does when he does play. So I don't know. I'm just open to the possibility. Like I want to see Love play, but I would not be shocked if in these next couple games, Love gets lit up again, and I'm like, okay, that didn't work. I wouldn't be shocked by it. Right now, his QB rating allowed is being propped up by his 4 interceptions, which is great, but he also gets targeted. What would this be? He's been targeted 62 times in 14 games, according to this, which for a safety is pretty ugly. He's been targeted way more than he was last year as a Giant already.
Yeah, that's where we also get to, I think, the difficulty in the Seahawks defense. This is why sometimes Quandre Diggs has a hard time being graded over the last couple of years, even when he has played well. When you're playing a zone-based defense like this and it's not man-on-man, I would argue with you, Brendan, that it gets tough for these guys because they don't know really, truly. You can look at the tape and you can say, I think it's cover 3. I think it's cover 4. I think it's man. But it's outside of it being a pure old school Legion of Boom cover 3 where you have corners off 15 yards. They're dropping with bail drop coverage and you got a single high safety. Pretty much every other coverage in the book can have a little bit of discrepancy on who should be doing what. And so you mentioned 64 targets, for instance. PFF has him sitting at 49 targets. That's a little bit of a difference. So, I've watched him this year. I've watched a lot of safeties play this year. Julian Love's not the worst player as a safety in coverage that I've watched at the safety position this year.
Mm-hmm.
And the overall grade, I don't know where the QBR, the other analytics stat has him, but they've got him as a pretty well graded safety, does PFF. Jamal Adams is what, 78th out of 95 graded 80.
Yeah, I know PFF has not been a big fan of his.
Yeah. And I mean, that matches up more to my eye test than Julian Love being the worst graded safety in coverage in the NFL.
Well, to be clear, they're not grading him as that. They just say he's given up more coverage yards than anybody else, which
and
is
that's
a little different.
Yeah. But it again becomes, I think, hard to necessarily always ascertain in these zone defenses whose problem was what, and then if you got a predictable defense on the back end, be it Bobby or Julian, I think this is also a better point to this, Brendan, which is this: when you have a predictable zone defense on the back end, which can know where your players are going to be aligned at, you're going to have more players probably generally, giving up that coverage, giving up those completions in general terms, not that should be the end all be all, just wipe it away, but just that we take that with a pinch of salt in this too, as far as maybe what some of, has been going on. But it's good. I think it's cool that you get at least all the data. All data is good data. More data is good data, Brendan. So maybe it is at that spot. I'd certainly like to see him roll out there, because at this point, 4 interceptions on the year, at least he's giving you a playmaker back there, which has been of course, missing element this year, especially even from a guy like Quandre, who's only given you 1 pick on the season. And you haven't had really, outside of Witherspoon and Derrick with a pick or 2 here, just even really any close opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, let's we got a dono here. Get this copy. Blitz 2K5, thank you for celebrating 19 long months as a Hawks Nest member. Says, showed up late. Apologies if you covered already, but who do you have prefer starting, Geno or Drew, Love or Adams, and go Hawks? Well, let's go backwards to front on that. We just had a good discussion regarding this Love Adams situation. Okay, so Adams says, okay, wait, Brendan, let me set up. Adams comes back to you, your coach, Brendan Nelson, in the locker room. I come in. Hey, coach, how's it going? I feel 100% better after that week of rest, coach. I know you had to send me and deactivate me. I'm sorry about that. I'm ready to get back out there. I'm ready to lay it on the line for this team. I want to go to the playoffs. I want to be there to do that. Will you ride with me, coach?
Well, I don't think Adams is going to be 100% healthy until he's like 65 with all the
coach,
stuff
you don't believe me
lately.
You don't believe me, coach? You think I would lie to you? Look at me. I'm here right now in your office looking you in the eye. I'm telling you I'm healthy.
It's going to be a long time before you're actually 100%. Like, he's going to be one of those guys who kind of like Kenny Easley, still kind of like, I've met Kenny Easley a couple times, and he's kind of grouchy, I think, because, he's still in constant pain from all the stuff that happened back when he played, and who can blame him?
I can't. And I understand it's part of the thing I say with Jamal. I know I've been a little bit maybe tough on him even in this show, but I've always tried to say a little bit, with it not necessarily going right here and it ending up down to the point where it's, okay, it's time. We got to move on from him. It's not all his fault. And there's a variety of issues that come into play on this one as to why this thing didn't exactly work out. So it's not just purely him, and the injury part's maybe the biggest part at the front of this. I've been looking back on it, prepping up, Brendan. It's groin, it's knee, it's both shoulders, it's 2 fused fingers. God knows if there's anything else that hasn't been reported beyond that. Yeah. It's the rebroken finger after one of them was fused last year in training camp. But so you're not, Jamal's pounding the desk in your office. He's like showing you. He's like, look, man, look. I can knee Henry in the balls.
Bill Parcells has a quote: "Players play, coaches coach, owners own." I'm the coach, you're the player. So
all right. I love it.
My decision here. Like I said, it's not going to be unconditional. I want to see what Love does in this role. I want to see how Love handles it. And if Love goes back to giving up 100-yard games in coverage like he has a couple times this year, then I'm going to reconsider. But like, how can you do anything else with the game Love just played on Monday Night Football? Like, it's supposed to be a competition, right? It's not supposed to be, I'm just going to give it to whoever makes the most money, right? It's not supposed to be, I'm going to give it to the guy who's made more Pro Bowls.
I think that's where the Seahawks are at their best, don't you? That's where Carroll
Mhm.
is at his best in his program, is when you can truly feel tangibly competition is king, not in sort of fancy talk to say to the reporters, and it sounds good on a placard, but actually something that you can see being done when it's readily apparent to be done on the team.
Right. So yeah, I'm going with Love for now, and we'll reevaluate as time goes by. But right now, I think you got to ride it. I think you got to go with it.
I'm a Julian Love as well on this one. I just this is the better option at this point, and there's a part of me that also just doesn't, unless we have something on the line, doesn't want to even risk with Adams the injury, because I want that clean medical so I can get my $16 million of cap space back this offseason.
Mhm.
All right, let's go to the number two.
Mhm.
Geno or Drew? One of the fierce debates that is raging along in the Seahawks fan base right now, Brendan. It's like fire. You don't want to touch it. It's so hot. So I'm gonna make you touch it. Which way do you go on this one?
There's no decision to make here. It's this would be kind of interesting, and by kind of interesting, I mean I still don't think I would change my mind if Love had some. I'm sorry, Locke had some dominant game against Philly. Even then, I would say, well, Philly's defense is terrible, guys.
Hmm.
But the last time Geno Smith played, he had like 350 yards and 4 touchdowns on the Cowboys on the road. Like that's who I'm riding with. That's who I'm riding with until I get some reason to believe that either he can't do that anymore or he's injured to the point where he just can't do the things that he needs to do, which I guess is possible, right? Like that injury he has is something that can linger. It's
That's my
not,
line for it. Yeah.
yeah.
All right,
But
go ahead.
if the doctors say he can go, then yeah, I think that's the obvious choice here.
Yeah, if I said if he's even kind of slightly reduced in capacity of mobility, be it Geno Smith, then I would lean to Drew. I don't trust Geno to the point. I rarely trust quarterbacks, Brendan, from my standpoint anyway. And you're at a highly reduced point, and I'm gonna have you go out there and try to play. There's always kind of a part of me with the coaches that have that outlook on things with these guys, and that I know it's a toughness thing, but it's also like, when you're hurt and you do something athletically and it's hurt, it catches. It's your back and it's when and like your groin that you got to use on every movement with your legs, it's going to catch. And if it's not at 100%, then go with Drew. If it's close to 100, if he's really able to show me he can move at practice, and if I was Carroll back there, I'd say, okay, Gino, I want you to show me. We're going to run some plays. I want you to leave the pocket. I want to see you moving in space. I want to see you moving in space laterally and clearing the pocket. I want to see you step climbing the pocket. And I want to see you moving well. And if he didn't, then I would go with Drew. But if he is reduced in capacity, then, or if he is okay in capacity, if he's, like you said, doctors say good and Geno looks good and it's a lot, then all right, let's roll with Geno. I think that's the best option.
Right, right.
Thank you though, Blitz. Appreciate your longtime support of the channel. 283-128. Thank you for the $5 donation. Off topic, but the Dodgers have spent $1.1 billion. Mariners supposedly have a budget of 30 million. Stanton needs to sell. I like this topic, Brendan. I'm going to love to hear your thoughts on it first, right off the gate, and then I'm going to come in with my little bit of fire on this one, because this one gets my blood up.
Yeah, I mean, there's really nothing to discuss here. This isn't, just as an example, Jody Allen, where I think that Jody Allen should move on from Pete Carroll and do something else, but I acknowledge that that's subjective. I acknowledge there are people out there who don't agree with that, and that's fine. Like, I understand that there is some degree of subjectivity there.
Mhm.
There's nothing subjective about what John Stanton is doing in terms of
No.
like, there's no way anybody can say like, oh no, what he's doing is actually good for the Mariners. Like some people can argue, no, keeping Pete Carroll is good for the Seahawks, but it's impossible to argue that spending less money is actually good. That's a galaxy brain take that I have not seen anyone try to make. So there's really nothing to talk about here, and I think as of right now, we've still spent no money, like literally zero money. So
Literally zero.
yeah, we haven't done anything yet, and I swear they just keep talking about trade rumors to like try to Like none of these trades ever happened. They keep talking about a Rosarina, and now they're talking about what's the name of that fat first baseman that we might trade for now? Somebody in
Oh,
the chat's gonna know.
the Indians guy, right?
Yeah, Grandel.
Oh, I know who you're talking about, but yeah,
Yeah,
and fat's the right word. Brent's
yeah.
not overstating that.
He's actually kind of fast too. That would be kind of fun. He's like a fat, fast, but still pretty fast first baseman. He actually steals bases. But I mean, at some point they're going to have to actually do some of this stuff. And we all know they're trying to hide behind the root sports thing, but other teams are having that exact same problem right now, and it's not really affecting them. So, I've already said, like, look, if this team doesn't exceed their payroll from 2023 this year, I'm just not watching games.
Yeah, I've already pretty much got to myself resigned to that point. I had a channel last year that the last couple of years we've had going there, and I'm at a spot this year where I'm done. You're not trying to compete, and from my standpoint, it's been going back for years, Brendan. It's the same old thing where 1995, you have go through and you have really good Mariner teams that don't quite get over the top, and you're always facing these organizations spending more money than you're spending, especially the Yankees. And you look at this deal, to me, on just the surface of it, it's to me a kind of a travesty for baseball, where you have a Dodgers team that's going to spend $2 million a year. I know Shohei pulled for it. He wanted it, but all the same, now they're going to be able to spend whatever they want to spend, wherever they want to spend it, and build their super team up. And it's not fair. You can't spend more than 100 million, 120, 130 million. You can tell me in baseball, if I've got teams with maybe a 50, $75 million discrepancy, that, okay, you can't just buy your way with that extra 75 million to a championship. But you start getting to 150, 200, you start pushing in that range over the top of everybody else. Yes, you can. And if we're on the bottom side of that, there's a reason that Moneyball was created like it was, is this desperation thing, because the team realized, hey, we don't have the money of these other teams. We can't make that happen. That's the whole point you got to Moneyball. And Moneyball has been tapped out because all the rich teams use Moneyball now. So poor teams can't just engage in Moneyball and go, that'll be the way now. That's why it no longer works for the A's like it once did, because every team has adopted those all of those kind of tenants and whatnot,
Exactly.
walks and
Yeah.
all that. So it's Stanton should be ashamed of himself. It is, he's got a fan base in Seattle that has followed this Mariner team for years. And on top of the fact that me watching for 30 years, Brendan, these organizations in baseball spend hundreds of millions more than we're willing to spend, and then that gets them better than us. I've also had to watch a Mariner ownership group, not just Stanton now, but the prior before that, unwilling to spend, unwilling to step up to the table and actually build a contender. Meanwhile, these fans show up every single year, summer after summer, packing that stadium, showing their support. And rather than reward that, rather than showing some imagination of, we could take this town over if we wanted to, we could make this ours. Rather than think like that, they think with a small-minded approach, bitching and moaning about their cable channel. My cable channel, my cable channel. Show some imagination. How about that? Get creative with it. But
yeah, I have a very simple philosophy. If you don't value, if you want to make money more than you want to win a championship, then sell the team.
yeah, get out, move on. Go. There's a literal trillion different ventures you can get into about money making that can make you a lot of money, especially if you're a billionaire that has got the kind of investment stake you can put in there. But don't do it for this. Not for this. Don't piss on other fandoms and hold them out so that you can have your ego stroked and your wallet padded. It's just because eventually it's going to get fans tuning out. They're fans, especially now in this day and age. You can only sell the pig as a cow for so long before they're like, no, that's just a pig.
Right. I agree.
Thank you, 283. It's definitely something that is frustrating to watch this offseason, especially for a team in Mariners that were this close to the precipice.
Yeah.
Kasra, thank you for celebrating 2 months as a Hawks Nest member. Says the next 3 opponents should be very easy. Injured Titans and Steelers, then the Cardinals. If we don't win out, we don't deserve to keep playing. I think that's a fair way of putting it. I would say the same. If we can't get 3 wins against these teams where they're at right now, then what you've done up until this point this year, I think you probably have earned not having a right to be in the playoffs at that point.
Yeah, and I will say that every team we've lost to this year is either going to make the playoffs or would have made the playoffs if not for catastrophic injuries, like with the Bengals, right? because we lost to the Rams twice. They're
Yeah.
going to make it. Let's be real here. They're going to make
Yeah.
it.
Especially the way they're playing right now.
Yeah, Ravens making the playoffs. Who am I forgetting here?
I'm going to them right now.
Cowboys are making the playoffs.
Cowboys are making the playoffs.
49ers making the playoffs.
That's right.
Is that it? No. Yeah, I think that's it.
That's it. Yeah. Because you lost the Rams twice and the Niners twice. That's why you're like, well, there's got to be another one. No, you lost those guys 4 times. So that's where your losses are sitting.
As frustrating and annoying and stupid as this season has been, we haven't lost to any bad teams yet. These teams are all good teams. And the Bengals might make the playoffs without Joe Burrow, which is a huge indication of how good they are if that actually transpires.
Yeah, I would not have put my money on that bet when he went down. That I would not have taken those odds. Even for a fat return, no. So hopefully they can get it done here, Kasra, and we'd love to see it. Me and Brendan both said we have our outlook on the team where we see them at, but make no mistake about it. We root for this team, want to see them successful. Would love to see them get in the playoffs, but they're going to have to get this done. And they've created this little bit of uphill road they've got to climb just to get in the playoffs. Now they've put themselves in this kind of position, so they've got to dig themselves out of it. But they're in a pretty good spot. Injuries, we're not decimated across the board. We have our starting offensive line, all of our tight ends, all of our wide receivers, all of our running backs at this point in time in the year. On the defensive line, everybody's basically on point except for Uchenna Nwosu. You got both your linebackers and their backup. You got everybody but Jamal basically into Devin Witherspoon. So, you're in a pretty good place right now and on that front to go get this done too. You're not kind of like last year, you're running out of gas at this point. So you're not from a roster standpoint, what we had. I mean, we had that Abrams as our starting safety, right? Tease Tabor. And that
I remember that. And with the offensive line, I think the thing that people lose track of is how important it is that you have the same guys playing every week.
Yeah.
Like I said in a video that I think that if we had a healthy offensive line this year, our offense would have been at least top 10. I think it's like 19th right now. And I'm saying if the offensive line had stayed healthy, it'd be top 10. People are like, well, we only lost Cross for a month. And then, Haynes isn't a big loss because he's not good. And Damian Lewis, it's like, that doesn't really matter. What matters is that these guys need to develop synergy. These guys need to develop cohesion. These guys need to get familiar with each other over week after week after week. I think we have 10 different starting offensive line combinations we've used this year. That's killer. So now that we've kind of settled in on this 5, unless Bradford loses his job, which really could happen the way he's playing. I mean, I'm not shocked. I'm not mad at him. He's clearly not ready. But if Haynes comes back next week and gets his starting job back, I won't be shocked.
But he got this 0 PFF score. Just that's the one where you go, boy, the coaches are gonna get freaked out watching the pass protection issues with him there.
But I do think that is the one part of this team that has a really valid excuse for what has happened this year. Like, to me, losing just Nwosu for this season is not enough to justify how bad the defense has been. But I can kind of see the offense having problems with the complete lack of cohesion on the offensive line.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm a big believer in continuity and cohesion are, to me, the big parts that bring about success on a line, and in addition to talent and ability. And you have a lot of games this year with 3/5, 4/5, even a game with 5/5 of your entire starting offensive line out. And when that's the case, it's just rotating every week. You're not getting continuity. You're not getting cohesion. And so you're missing a very important element of the process for particular success. Daniel W., thank you for the $20 donation. He's got a happy belated birthday to Brendan Nelson.
Thank you.
Turned 48 years young this year. What? I'm not going
to I wish that would justify some of my justify some of my health issues.
Oh goodness. Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, it would justify the fact that I'm getting an implant in my mouth, right? Because I think the average age for Americans losing their first permanent tooth is like 42 or something, 42, 43. So the fact that I'm losing one at 34 is like not ideal.
Makes you feel any better. That was when I lost mine though. I lost my only tooth at 35 too. So sometimes you just have one go rogue on you, man. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Those roots will go rogue, and it'll go down like that.
right.
But Daniel, thank you for the happy birthday to Brendan as he turns his way into the mid 30s here.
Right.
Mid 30s fun, man. You're still young. You're not in that too old phase. Get to my age, man. Everything just starts to hurt a little bit. Gets sore when it's
I'm
sore
not
when it
too far
shouldn't be.
away from it.
It lands. It lands with a thud, I tell you. Um, all right, let's turn this over to the offensive side of the ball a little bit more and discuss this matchup with the Titans. Because in looking at him, we talked a second ago about their at the start of the show a little bit, I should say, at the secondary and where that is. They've been a team that has tried to build their secondary up. They took a good chance with that. They had Kevin Byard there early on in the year, the Fulton, the Caleb Farley. They've tried to get it all working back there to kind of jive with what they're doing on the front end, and it's just not come together with some of the guys they drafted. Of course, they've moved Kevin Byard to the Philadelphia Eagles in a trade deadline deal. So we've got right off the top, when I look at this, Brendan, with our receivers coming into this, with where they've kind of been playing recently, passing attack and how it's been going along. I mean, the first thing I start off with here is I'm not sure what we're going to be able to do in the ground game, but I think we can make some hay against this Titans team with our passing attack.
Yeah, actually, this Titans team kind of reminds me of the Huskies for a decent chunk of this season because the Huskies, good chunk of the year, were down to like their fourth string safeties. They literally had so many injuries on the back end. They were just complete garbage there for most of the year because people kept getting hurt. Like Asa Turner was supposed to be our stud back there, and he got hurt, and then another guy gets hurt, another guy gets hurt, another guy gets hurt. So you've traded Kevin Byard or Bird or Bard
Byard.
or Byard, and Amani Hooker and Kayvon Wallace are both not practicing. So that gets them all the way down to like their practice squad safeties almost. They're almost to Jonathan Abram territory themselves.
In case of glass
So
break, Abrams.
yep. So you should be able to beat them up on the back end here. So if this offensive line can hold up at all for the quarterback, be it Geno or Locke, and it does sound like it will be Geno, then you should be able to make some serious hay back there because their cornerback room is not really any better. They're down Sean Murphy Bunting potentially because he's not practicing. He was their starter. They've got that Roger McCreary guy. I remember looking at him a little bit in college. He's a former second round pick, playing pretty decently, but they've also got a Trey Avery. He's not been good this year.
No. And the one thing with Roger, remember with Roger McCreary, the one thing that you got, if you get especially DK matched up with him, 29.5-inch arms. And on college tape at times he could be there close in coverage, but he just didn't have the length to go get that at times against certain receiver matchups. So with especially a guy DK in there, that extra, if you get that matchup one-on-one the outside, especially with not necessarily being able to trust those safeties over on the back end, I would definitely try to attack that where I've got that mismatch. Though he has played really good. He's a good football player. He'll put his nose in there in the run game, and you can kind of move him around as far as a little bit into the slot as well.
Yeah, and like you said, they don't have Caleb Farley right now. And the other corner that they tried to draft, that is, what was his name?
Christian Fulton.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is a secondary that is down to very, very little. Like, we're bummed out. We might not have Witherspoon and to a certain extent Adams, but their secondary is much worse off right now. It is a disaster. So you've got that going on here. By the way, Arden Key apparently got dinged up today in practice, so he's now on the injury report. He's maybe their top pass rusher along with Harold Landry, who I think you and me are both not big fans of Harold Landry the third.
No. The guy that was most comped is Daryl Taylor coming out. Funny enough, too, by the way. That was the name that always kept getting associated with him. They got Danico on the inside, though, too. Danico and Jeffrey Simmons are but that's on the outside for sure.
Yeah, but Jeffrey Simmons is also not practicing.
Oh,
May not play.
Jeez,
So
that would be huge.
Yeah. Also not practicing is Gibbons, their starting linebacker, who's actually been pretty good this year, it seems like. I don't know a ton about him, but he's been graded out fairly well. And what I've seen seems to be pretty okay. So this defense, really, I mean, this is a defense that has an excuse to be terrible, way more than the Seahawks defense does. Like, if they go out there and give up 40 points to us, it's not even going to be I don't think anybody could even really hold it against them because they are down
Mm.
so many crucial guys.
Yeah, and it is a defense that's pushed really by those guys in the defensive line doing their job as a combination between them. Jeffrey Simmons, Arden Key, who's got I think six sacks on the year. Denico, who isn't necessarily highly graded, but has got himself 11 sacks I think on the year, something like. He's got a lot of sacks I think on the year, if I'm not mistaken. So they do get some production out of those guys, and they do hold up as well-rounded players on the defensive line and playing the run, playing the pass. And as I said earlier, Vrabel will get those guys playing, hard. But if you miss Jeffrey Simmons, I think he's probably a top 10 defensive tackle in this sport. He's probably similar to Derrick Brown, and he's a little bit of a guy that does most of his damage as a run defender, but he can give you some pass rush too. And he does really require the double team blocks more often than not. That would be a big loss to them of any player that they lose in this game, Brendan, in my opinion, if he's not able to go, because that is kind of their focal point on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah. Jeffrey Simmons, maybe their best player right now overall.
Mm.
I don't know, but I think that he is. He's missed a couple games now. He's not practicing. I don't expect him to play. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Well, he got paid. No, I'm joking. But yeah, no, that would be he's a monster in there, and he would give us fits if he is in there. So that's Seahawks could have some advantages to take advantage on this defense. It sounds like even if they're not playing, if they are playing Brendan, they're not going to be at 100%. But boy, if you have no Simmons, now I'm going to not only start to feel good about what we can do against that pass coverage on the back end, I'm going to feel mighty fine also about what you're going to be able to get handled in the ground game, because that's where, of course, we love to attack, is those A and B gap runs. And we will be testing that like nothing else if he's not in there.
Yeah, you should be able to kind of have your way with this defense. Although I will say, K9 not practicing this week after the game he just had against Philly, probably a little bit tired from putting the team on his back for those first 58 minutes. I don't blame him. My shoulder would be hurt too. I'm like Atlas, he's like Atlas holding the globe up on his shoulders. His shoulders hurt. Coincidence? I think not.
Yeah, that's good. That's all right. That's why we got Charbonnet. That's why he's here.
Yeah, so I definitely want to attack this secondary, which is why I'm hoping Geno plays, because while I do think we could run the ball on this Titans team, I feel like their weakness right now is their secondary, and we clearly just do not have a lot of faith in Drew Lock to run the offense, and I think we would have even less faith on the road.
Yeah, I just wouldn't. I'd much further feel better about where we'd have with Geno there, and I like the thought too of their secondary safety situation. They're probably concerned with what our receivers can do on the outside, draws them into more probably cover 2 looks. That means you're probably going to get a good amount of light boxes in this game. In addition to that, which again could go to helping out your run. I think it will be a balance in this game that can get you there a bit. But I agree with you. I think you're mainly going to need to get done what you're going to need to get done in the air with this team. You're also, I think, going to need to be leaning into the patient approach, because the Titans defense, at least on the bit of tape I watched, I didn't go too far down the line on it, but I watched a couple of their games. And defensively, while they will bring the occasional blitz in through there, they are going to be a team that is going to mainly make you kind of earn it up the football field. And I feel like they're going to lean into that even more with some of their secondary issues and acknowledging we got to protect that a little bit coming into this game. So patience offensively may very well be a big name of the game for this one for them. Like, it'll be there to be had, but you just got to stay. And Geno or Drew, whoever's the guy, that don't get too jumpy and needing to make that 9 route throw and feeling forced to do that. The 5-7 yard chunk play right there underneath the little here and there is going to be there all day. So take that.
Yeah, absolutely. Beat them that way. I'm sure they're going to be playing very cautiously if all these corners are out. If they're down to the nub at corner, then they kind of have to remember how we used to do it with Trey Flowers, where we would just say, give them 5 yards, give them a free 5 to 8 yards every play. It's okay.
Yeah, that's it. That's the most, what I saw in this defense more than anything else in coverage, Brendan, was them and off coverage and the stop route with the receivers on the outside. More of those completions up against this Tennessee Titans defense than anything else. So a heavy amount of that. You always like to say with DK, the comeback route should basically always be open if you don't have the corner and trail coverage underneath them, which is what you're not going to get if you're getting that off coverage and they're bailing out off of the snap as they're going to depth. They're trying to take away the 9 route. So another thing to take advantage of here, easy thing to take advantage of, I think, on this Titans defense. But sounds like just merely by the already from a talent standpoint, Brendan, they're behind the 8 ball, but then also it's a talent efficient defense that's also now maybe potentially also having some key injuries across the board, especially on that defensive line. And that should make already kind of a shaky dam start to burst free as long as we can play up to our potential offensively.
Yeah, and like I said, if you punch them a couple times, they will probably just lay down because there's no playoffs. They're not playing for much of anything. They're thinking about Cabo. They're thinking about Cancun, and that's just the way it usually goes in the NFL. I think even Derrick Henry did a post-game conference after the Texans game last week where he had the worst game of his career. And his mind, though he was commenting about stuff, he was already talking about the future. Like, I don't know where I'm going to be next year. I know my contract's up. You don't usually hear players talk about things like that, but Derrick Henry's mind was clearly not on the present in that conference.
Yeah, it's those human nature things where a fan might say, he should be on football now. We're paying him right now to worry about today. Don't be thinking about tomorrow. You're being paid to worry about right now. But it's like what a person may think a guy should do versus the human nature tendency of what they will do in those kind of situations. And I think that's one of the reasons both of you are going to find us. I mean, on top of what we feel like, probably I'm going to make a guess on you that we both feel like we're a better team than this team, that also what we're playing for, what they're not necessarily having to play for being much of anything at this point, really gives you a kind of a little bit of a built-in advantage versus if you're coming into this game on the road, Brendan, and the Titans were same team they're trotting out there, but they're, 8-6, and actually right there in the thick of things. And it does make that a lot scarier of a proposition, especially at that 10 a.m. time, I think, for me coming in with this. But I do see us able to score some points. What you like the DK and the slot stuff? More of that?
Oh, I guess they use McCreary as their slot corner, who is their best corner right now. But like you said, he's got a real matchup problem with DK. So I do kind of like that. Yeah. Like, I don't know if JSN against McCreary is the matchup you want. I think that maybe this is a game where you try JSN outside. Last time he took the field as an outside receiver, it worked out very well for us. So, yeah, I kind of like that idea. I think this game could also be a nice opportunity for Lockett to get back on track. People are kind of being harsh with him right now, and I get it. I kind of get it, but at the same time, I know that he's still capable of being a very good player.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, I feel the same way. I think he's still fine. I think Lockett's part of the long-term plans here still, at least for another year. Well, let's turn it to the score of this football game. Let's turn to how we see this game playing out. First, tell me how you see this game playing out, Brendan, then give me a score kind of on the end of it.
We come out a little bit sluggish because it's a road game, and we're also a little hungover from the Eagles game. Short week. There's some stuff to work through, unfortunately. I will acknowledge that because, again, I want to punch this team in the mouth at the start and see if they even get up. But I think it does start out a little bit slow. Maybe we take a little bit of a lead at halftime, but I think eventually things get going. This should be a game where we can generate some QB pressure because Titans' offensive line has not been good this year at preventing pressure. And I'm going to go with something like, I'm going to say 27-17.
Ooh, I like it. I like it. I think I do feel similarly to you. I think the short week, you kind of can't understate that just a little bit. Even though you got to play it at home, that's one last day of rest and recovery after in the midst of a long season where you had an early bye week. And I think that does make this a little more of a struggle than it might seem to be on the surface of it for all the reasons you and I just talked about, the Titans injury situation, how you have some matchup advantages, where the Titans just are as a team, being down the quarterback they'd like to prefer to be starting. Nonetheless, Tannehill out there, but I think Tannehill's a pro. He's going to get enough stuff done and understand in ways to attack this defense enough to where he's going to probably find, I think, in my opinion, some surprising points here because he's going to lean into those things like he did before. And he's also, at this point, if he is playing, trying to highlight himself for other teams that might want to go after him this offseason. So I'm going to get them putting 21 points up on the board in this game. Tannehill finding a little rejuvenation, but I do see this offense able to really make it happen. I think the defense will find a couple game-changing turnovers in there too, but I think that we'll get out to something like a 30-20 game. I think where the offense really gets cooking, the offensive line, like you talked about, is finally a little bit more locked in with the cohesion, especially with your bookend tackles now, not only back, Brendan, but back to running full breath, full steam, and looking both like they're locking into that second year improvement that we hope we were going to see from them. Not some monstrous, they're becoming stars, but we're seeing here it's coming up. It was a good first season, and now here's another even little kind of, okay, it's getting a little bit better even. And I know in Lucas's case, it's certainly a sample size, but I'm going to lean to that and feel like we're going to find a way there to carry it with it offensively speaking. Again, maybe it'd be a pick six or just a fumble somebody picks up at some point in time. And that allows you to kind of really fully carry the day. But like you said, don't think it's going to be where you just get out in front of them and you're just, coasting along. I think it's going to be probably a fight through much of this game before you're able to kind of fully separate.
Would be nice. I would not argue against it if it happened.
I wouldn't mind it either. A blowout wouldn't feel. We've had enough of the heart attack games. I think we filled our reservoir up to the tap full. It's all the way up to the top on that one. No room left. Let's have a couple of more of those easy, fun, free and easy victories where you win by a lot and just a bunch of great moments. That'd feel pretty nice.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, folks, I thank you guys for watching tonight. Do me this favor, please, and do hit that like button for me if you could, as well get subscribed up if you're not already, as well. Do go over there to Seahawks Brendan Nelson. That is his channel here on YouTube, and do get subscribed to him. We do these shows twice a week during the year, and we will continue to be doing these throughout the off season. So you definitely want to be subscribed to both sides of that. Brendan, I thank you as always for coming on in here, man. It's been a fun season to chopping this up. Good, bad, indifferent, win, lose, or draw. I've had a great time going over this team with you throughout this year, and it's going to be fun watching this down the stretch.
Yeah, thank you for having me back on. We will do this again very soon.
Well, awesome. Thank you guys tonight for watching. We appreciate you for doing that. We got our Hawks, who, in my opinion, I know there's a little bit of work that needs to be done on the front end here tonight after the Rams got themselves a win here. But I still trust Brendan feels the same way, that if you take care of business, if you handle business. Last year, we got into that Rams game at the end, and it wasn't all in our control. It wasn't just that we had to win the Rams game. We also need the Lions to beat the Packers in Lambeau. And it sucks that we got to be in a bit of that place, but that's where we are. So let's take care of our business, right, Seahawks fans? Let's get what we need to get done and trust the process like we did last year. And maybe we get some better results in the playoffs than we did last year. But the key here is we get these 3 wins. Me and Brendan both definitely think we're going to get in. I think there's a great chance, but we got to get these next 3 wins. No more room for error. So let's get it done, Hawk fans. Let's get this dub. Let's see if we can slide on in here into the playoffs and see if this team maybe still has some untapped potential yet this season. Some upside we have yet to see.
Yeah.
We will be back next Tuesday. Brendan, thank you for doing this, brother. I appreciate you as always. And we'll be back next Tuesday. Of course, the BNB Show wrap up here on this channel. But until that time, my fellow Seahawks faithful, shouldn't have to remind you in the middle of a playoff hunt, when you're in the thick of it, when the dollar's got the scent and you got the shotgun in your arm. So I shouldn't have to remind you, but we're going to do so anyway. Okay. Going to do so anyway. So get that duck whistle. Let's get ourselves ready for the Titans this week. Let's go get this dub. And please, my fellow Seahawks faithful, do not you ever forget, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.